Welcome to Friday with Friends. Friday with Friends is our opportunity to talk about what's happening in the real estate market, answer any questions you might have, so that if you have any real estate needs, we would love the opportunity to be your realtors of choice.
Yes, and we are so excited to be here today. Today we are talking about a common question that it's not often common that these things happen, but when it does, it can definitely affect closing. So here today we are talking about our top 5 pre-closing mistakes that might come up and how to avoid them.
And the reason why this has been coming up so much is if you work with us, we work really hard to avoid these things. Have each of these probably happened to us at some point over selling 1,000 houses? Yes. But do we work really hard to have systems and we cross our T's and dot our I's so that these don't happen? But the reality is there have been a lot of sellers that sell their home for sale by owner, or there have been a lot of buyers who are buying without representation. And you have these situations that arise that it's easy for them to happen if you don't have proper representation and you don't know about them. So whether you have representation, whether you don't have representation, it is still top 5 things that we want you to make sure you're keeping in your mind so that in the 11th hour, you don't have the tiniest little hiccup that could create a cascade of problems.
Definitely. So let's get right into it. So number 1 is, as a seller or a buyer, inspection items are not completed. And why it could be on both sides is the seller might have not completed inspection repairs prior to closing like they were asked to in the contract, or maybe a buyer didn't get proper documentation. They thought they were done when they ended up not being. So this is a really big piece that can cause hurdles right in the 11th hour.
Exactly. And so when a buyer performs an inspection, they basically maybe find some things. No, there haven't been a whole lot of inspections, but we're starting to get back to them. Are you seeing you're starting to get back to more inspections?
Yes, I would say in the last few months we've maybe had 1 or 2, but that's more than 0 in the spring and summer.
Yeah, we had the previous year. And I know with our on our buyer's end, we have been negotiating inspections and getting them there. But when you do an inspection, even if you're doing a walkthrough, part of your offer is then saying, I will continue to buy this house subject to you doing A, B, C, and D. And what a buyer's agent could write is saying, we want you to complete all of these things and provide us receipts 48 hours prior to closing. Well, guess what happens when they provide those receipts and they're not satisfactory? Well, we now are looking at that you said you were going to complete an electrical item that wasn't completed in the way that we had hoped. Well, we now need to find an electrician that needs to come out in the next 3 hours in order to keep everything flowing.
Right.
So it is no longer, we want you to give the receipts to us and the documentation. Maybe it's photos. Maybe you're doing another walkthrough. Maybe you have a professional do a walkthrough again to make sure that it's not happening within 48 hours, but it's happening within a time that allows us that if there are inspection items that we need to have done, completed, that we are able to answer any questions or to finalize some details and maybe do it the right way that the buyer requested without it disrupting closing in the 11th hour.
Exactly. And that's why our team is stalking for these inspection items.
To get it done,
on the buyer's side, to get those receipts as early as possible. That way it's not, okay, we're supposed to close in a day and this hasn't been done. We need to find an electrician to go over there, or we need the seller to credit us a certain amount so we then can do this work after closing. But maybe we get those receipts 2 weeks ahead of time and now we have the ample time to get that done. So that is going to be number 1, is those inspection items that were requested by the buyer were not completed prior to closing, which is creating this problem. Yes.
I have one more thing that you just made me think of is what another piece to make sure that when you are writing in your inspection release is that your agent, your representation is writing in the right terms. So let me give you an example.
So important.
Is sometimes you'll have an agent that says, we would like the furnace to be cleaned and inspected, period. Well, then in the 11th hour, we see that it was clean and inspected.
By Uncle Jerry.
By Uncle Jerry. That is not a licensed and professional, reputable HVAC company. We need to make sure that when you are writing these pieces in, that you as a buyer are protected, and it's not just clean and inspect the furnace. It is clean and inspect by a professional HVAC company. And you could even have the one you want them to do. You can write whatever you want in there. But when you are starting in the front end, it will be less likely that you're going to have any challenges in the 48 hours prior to closing.
Yep, and that's a really big one, whether with big ticket items, so like your furnace and your air conditioning unit, or health and safety pieces like electric. You want to make sure that a licensed electrician,
Yes.
a reputable company are handling those big items when it comes to inspection repairs.
Words are so important in contracts.
Definitely.
Okay, so I'm really done now. I'm done with number
promise?
one. I
Okay.
promise. Okay, so number two, the second mistake that you can make that pre-closing creates a huge challenge is when you change something on your financial side.
Oof.
And this is something, literally, it's like the big joke, like, oh, Johnny went out and bought a car. Like, guys, it happens.
It happens.
It happens so often. So we are constantly putting it into our clients' minds to make sure that you are not doing this. And what we mean is, first is the credit, that there's been a change within your credit. Maybe you are working to get furniture for your house and you end up saying, well, I'll just put it on a credit card. I'll just open up a credit card for my new furniture for my new house. Just something as simple as that could completely disrupt your credit and can impact your ability to close on that loan.
Definitely. Or maybe you want to save 15% at Old Navy. Don't open the credit card.
Say no.
Say no. Don't open the credit card. That can make a huge impact on the credit, which of course is going to affect your potential closing on a mortgage. Hey, and you might even still be able to close, but now your fees have increased, your potential credit, your interest rate, things like that. So make sure we're keeping an eye on that. And also this can play into effect with your employment. Any changes on your financial side can impact your mortgage and potentially your ability to close. So let's say you're offered a new job. Make sure you're having these discussions with your lender, with your bank, to make sure that it's not going to have any negative impact on you and your mortgage, and of course, getting to the closing table.
Perfect. Love it.
Awesome.
What's number three?
So number three, per the New York State contract, the property needs to be broom swept, broom clean, prior to transferring to a new owner.
Which is the most vague term known to mankind.
Exactly.
Carry on.
Depends what type of broom you have. I mean, I don't know.
Do you have a Dyson?
Yeah, Swiffer. So depending.
Classic old broom.
Exactly. So it's a very vague term, but really this can create issues down the line because a buyer might come in and say, gosh, this house is not to the level that I thought it would be. I'm going to need to hire a cleaner. There were maybe some personal items left behind that I just don't want, that shouldn't be here. And I need to now have that taken out either prior to closing or again, potentially a credit offered to take care of those items.
And this is one of those things that we know everyone lives differently. My broom clean is different than someone else's broom clean. If you talk about what Sue Friend's broom clean is, it is literally like cleaning the shower grout. Like there are some people who are like, the fridge is, has some food in it, but it's still fine. And we as sellers and representing our sellers have to make sure we're communicating what broom clean actually looks like. And there could be a buyer that walks in and is shocked at how disgusting the house might be, whereas the seller is like, I thought I did a great job. And so these are things that we just want to make sure as a seller, you are communicating and what is important to what we expect from the buyer side, but also preparing a buyer to say, just because you think that it should be spotless doesn't necessarily mean a seller will do that. Because when we're managing expectations on both sides, no matter what we're walking into, it prepares us better.
Definitely. And one piece of the puzzle is if you're buying a home, make sure that there's not things left behind that you then have to deal with when you sell. I know this is a common thing. Well, they left paint and they left, extra flooring and things like that they left for you, but now you are stuck removing them when you sell the home as well. So just making sure that. Another piece of the puzzle is the lawn. Up until the closing date, you as the seller own the home and need to maintain the home. So a lot of times if people move out of the area, the lawn might become a little overgrown, maybe leaves start falling, things like that. We just need to make sure that the home is completely maintained up until we get to the closing table.
Exactly. And again, it's easy to say, oh, it's not long enough. It's not long enough.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes a quick mow, call up your neighbor, hey, can you help me out, can change the way that that buyer is feeling when they're taking over your home.
Definitely.
Okay, so number 4, this is a huge one.
Huge.
The fourth challenge that we have in pre-closing in the 11th hour is that the utilities get shut off.
Ooh, I got chills. It's not good.
It's one of the worst things we can walk into. So here, let me kind of frame it. So essentially, you're going into your final walkthrough, and you do your final walkthrough within 48 hours prior to closing. And what sometimes sellers will do is what we used to do in the olden days is it olden?
I don't know.
Back in the day, we used to have the sellers call RG&E to say, we will be having our service transferred to a new client. We just want to give permission that that the buyer will call and transfer. Well, what has happened is the client will give that notice to RG&E, and what they think is they think that it means it's going to be turned off.
They just turn it off.
They just turn it off. And what happens is during the walkthrough, a buyer is walking through saying, listen, I need to make sure that the appliances work.
The furnace.
I need to make sure that the heat works, that the air works. All of these things that when you don't have electricity, you can't do.
Exactly. And per the contract, the utilities need to be on at the time of closing so all of these items can be tested. And many times the seller's like, I didn't tell them to turn it off, but it happens. And why this creates such an issue is because of a timeline issue. First of all, it does cost money to have RG&E, NYSEG, whoever your electric provider is, to come back out and turn on the utilities. So first of all, you're paying a fee. Then the timing issue. If the final walkthrough is 48 hours prior to closing, what are the odds that the electric company can come out within 2 days?
They're like, we'll be there in a week. And we're like,
June 15th. We're like, it's December.
we're like, what? And it makes it so hard.
Yes, it's super difficult. So then you're in a spot where, do you push back closing? What are we going to do to bring this together? And it really creates a timeline issue at the end of the transaction that can definitely be avoided.
And we've even had it where the buyer had their stuff on a moving van, ready to go, does the walkthrough, and realizes that the utilities aren't on. The seller's like, I literally put them on notice that someone else was going to transfer the utilities.
Yeah.
And so it's hard because no one really did anything wrong. And here we are, and we're stuck between a rock and a hard place. And that's where we've had to get creative, where we've done an escrow, where there is a certain amount that is held back so that the property can still close. And there's going to be risk on both sides for it, but hopefully it's just a matter of turning the utilities on and be back at it. But man, that is an 11th hour challenge.
Yes. So what we're really recommending for our clients now is sellers, just wait until we get a little bit closer. We'll have the buyers call at that final walkthrough once they get those final meter readings, make the transfer, and then after closing, you can then call to verify that they've been transferred, just as an extra piece to make sure that the transfer has taken place, but you're also not calling potentially too early to have that risk of them being turned off. The word turned off and transferred are different.
They're different words.
But sometimes there's a little miscommunication there.
Exactly. And so number 5, the 5th mistake, were you done?
Yeah, let's do it.
The 5th challenge that we have, and the mistake that happens in the 11th hour, is that there's not the personal property that you thought would be there.
Yes.
Now again, we're going formal per the New York State contract. How it works is if there is anything that is physically attached to the property, it stays. So if you have shelves that are attached to the property, if you have light fixtures, they are attached to the property, those are automatically assumed to stay. So let's say you have a 57 million inch screen TV that is mounted. Is it attached? It sure is. And so if you as the seller are not saying it is excluded from the sale, the buyer could have the right to be able to say,
very gray area.
I thought it was attached. The seller could say, no, it's a TV. It still plugs in and I'm just attached to the mount, which is attached to the wall. These are all things that need to be clarified so that there are no 11th hour issues with items that are attached.
Yep. So again, bolted to the wall, it stays. Plus, most of the time, again, 90% of the time, your kitchen appliances stay. Washer and dryer are oftentimes negotiable as well. But the other side is, okay, things were gone that I was expecting to stay, but what if I negotiated in the patio furniture or the dining room table and I was going to pay a few $100 for that, and then I get there and it's gone? That might not be as big of a deal as your kitchen appliances, but you still negotiated that, and we want to make sure that that's very clear. On the other side is maybe there's personal property there that you did not want that they left you, like your kitchen table, things like that, and now we have to negotiate. This wasn't in the contract. It's not attached to the wall. We either want it out prior to closing or we want a credit to have it removed, things like that.
And we're really starting to see a shift because we've been in such a seller's market. The sellers are kind of in a position where they're like, you're gonna have to deal with it. So let's say the seller doesn't want to remove paint, or is like, oh, but that wood is from the shed in the back and we thought you might like that. Well, if you're not communicating and asking, the buyer might not like that. And so when they're walking through with their walkthrough, you're done and you've moved on to your next house, and they're saying, wait, hold on, we have a lot of items in here that we didn't want, we didn't discuss. And that's the key here, is that you are discussing all of these things. And we as realtors that have done this 1,000 times can be able to educate everyone in the process to be able to say, ooh, I see this is probably an item that the seller may want to leave behind or question. Let's discuss it now so that we know and it's not something that comes up in the 11th hour.
Definitely.
So those are our top 5. So number 1 is that the inspection items aren't completed properly. Number 2
is there's been some change in your financial situation, whether that's employment or credit.
Number 3 is broom clean and the property is not left in the proper condition that the buyer expected.
Definitely. Number 4 is going to be that those utilities are turned off. Again, per the contract, they need to be on at closing.
And number 5, the 5th way that you could have a big challenge in the 11th hour prior to closing is that you have personal property that you have left or that the seller had left that you were not expecting.
That's it.
Now, all of these are things that can be easily taken care of, but they're all simple mistakes that happen. And so it is our job, and we love to be able to represent clients, to be able to see them before they happen, and to build in systems so that they hopefully don't. Because our job is not just to help you find the house, but it's to help the process be enjoyable and smooth so that there's a minimal amount of stress and you can actually enjoy the process of buying or selling your home.
Definitely, definitely.
Well, that's all we have for you today on Friday with Friends. Again, Friday with Friends is our opportunity to talk about the real estate market, answer any questions you might have, so that if you do have any real estate needs, we would love the opportunity to be your realtor of choice. You can find us at friendonyourside.com or anywhere in social media. We would love the opportunity to help you.
Yes, we are easy to find. We'll talk with you soon.
Bye.